my name is Jara. Welcome to my channel. I teach people how to garden, raise backyard chickens, and keep bees. Today I'm harvesting a ton of different veggie crops around my garden, so I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to bring you guys along. You can watch me harvest. I'm going to give commentary, tips, suggestions for all of these different crops that I'm growing here in my garden to hopefully give you guys a lot of ideas. Plus, it's also an opportunity to give you guys a little tour of my garden. I actually have two gardens. This one is my home garden. This is where I live and I'm here every day. It's a very small little garden because I live in an HOA community, so I'm restricted to just growing food in my backyard. If you also have a small garden and are looking for ideas on how to expand, how to fit in more and more food so you can grow as much as possible, you'll definitely want to check out this whole video. I'll point out the different structures and things that I use to maximize how much I can grow. But anyways, let's get started with harvesting everything today and giving you a little garden tour. So my garden is basically like a U shape. We'll start here and we'll walk completely around the property. This is my Barbados cherry tree. I love this. If you live in the South and you get really, really hot summers and barely any kind of winter, definitely no snow, you can definitely grow this Barbados cherry. And I say that because regular standard cherries don't grow well in the South. They require a certain amount of cold or cold chill hours to be able to flower and produce every year. So in Florida, we cannot grow cherries. But you can grow these Barbados cherries, which look just like regular cherries. They taste like fruit punch to me. They're absolutely delicious, and they have an extremely high amount of vitamin C, by far more vitamin C than your standard like oranges. This tree started flowering for me in February, and it will continue flowering and fruiting flush after flush all the way through the end of summer. So you're gonna get a lot of harvest from this. The birds also love eating this too, so you have to wake up early to hurry up and harvest them all. But that's what they look like, and they're so delicious. I also have this Grumichama, which is another one of my favorites. Again, another warm, mild, tropical type of plant. It has very beautiful glossy leaves, so it makes for a nice shrub for like landscaping purposes, but you get something edible out of it. And it does produce berries. They're not necessarily cherries in my opinion, around this size, but it has more of like a grape flavor. They're absolutely delicious. This spot gets a lot of bright morning sun with like complete afternoon shade, and these tropical type plants do really well in this condition. I also plant every single pineapple top from the pineapples I buy at the grocery store down here below these two trees because they also do a little bit better in some part shade, especially in hot climates like here in Florida. So there's literally quite a few pineapples down below. Now we're making our way through the rest of the garden. This is the triple L crop, also called the Italian tree tomato, and no joke, this literally gets to be a mini tree by the end of my season. It's growing up this 10-foot T-post, and yeah, it definitely goes above and beyond the 10 foot. I have it on a tomato hook and string system so that I can just kind of run the vines down as the growing season progresses. And it has a couple tomatoes right now. They're not red yet, but they are forming. This is my first garden bed here, and I have a couple things growing. Primarily on the back, I have some Kajari melons. I've got some Black Beauty eggplants here, which I also need to harvest a bunch of those. And then here on the edges, I have some different tomato cultivars that are growing. I just harvested a ton of sweet corn that was growing in the middle of this bed. I cut all the stalks down. I'm going to use those for composting or even mulching. You can lay the stalks over the surface of your garden beds to basically break down and be a mulch. It's very good for your soil. So now that I have this spot here cleared out, I think I'm going to plant a ton of Seminole pumpkins because we are going into the summer season, and those Seminole pumpkins withstand all the heat, the rain, the pests, the diseases. If you're in the South and you struggle with the squash vine borers or anything like that, definitely try growing any kind of squash in the Cucurbitaceae moscata family because they have extra thick and hard stems and vines, so they kind of withstand or resist the squash bugs and the worms a lot better than other cultivars of squash. Because I'm in the month of April, I'm well past my last spring frost date, I'm just going to start direct sowing seeds for Seminole pumpkins in this bed. I wanted to show you guys these onions though because they are ready for harvest. I bought some onion sets from Dixondale's farm last fall in November, and I planted the onions on the edges of my garden beds. That's a great way to maximize your growing space. You can harvest onions at any point, really. A lot of people say at least wait until the greens have started bending and toppling over. which is fine. I personally like to wait until the greens are brown and completely dried out. And that's just to give the onion bulb like as much time as possible to get as big as possible. And these ones are pretty big. So I'm gonna harvest one of these just to show you guys. You just simply pull them out. Look at that, wonderful. And you don't have to cure onions like you do with like sweet potatoes or anything like that. But you do want to just hang them up indoors so they can dry out and get the outer skins to dry out so it'll store a little bit better. Now, I love eating onions, and the flavor of a freshly picked homegrown onion is by far so much stronger than anything you can buy at the grocery store. It is great. I really like popping in onions or anything in the allium family in between my tomato plants. So you see there's some tomatoes here, so I had the onions growing kind of like in between on the edges. So this is our first harvest of the day, these beautiful onions. This is some Black Beauty eggplant. It's a very productive variety, and I had to like finagle away to give it some support. So I got these, this is like fencing, like metal fencing that you buy in a roll. And so I cut some to make kind of a circular support or cage for this, and I just propped it right over the whole plant. It's working pretty well because if you didn't know, eggplants are actually perennial. So this thing's gonna get huge over the next couple years. And I can't tell you how many eggplants I've already harvested from this plant. Now, I used to not like eggplant. I was not a fan until I started growing it myself because I don't like mushy vegetables. And I feel a lot of people will agree with me. But when I started growing them at home, I can control when to harvest them. So I harvest them just as they start getting a little bit soft, but when you press down on it with your fingers, they spring back a little bit. And you'll know what I mean when you grow the eggplants. And that is like the perfect time to harvest them. They have a nice firm texture and they really hold up a lot better when you cook with them. Black Beauty eggplants get really, really big. This is on the smaller side, but I actually prefer to harvest them when they're smaller so they're more tender. They have less bitterness when you harvest them at a younger stage as well. And that's another thing that I get asked a lot. People say that eggplants have a bitter flavor. And yeah, I think all of them have some sort of bitterness to them. But again, when you grow your own, you control when you harvest them. So harvest them young, just as they start springing back when you press your finger on them. And before I cook with the eggplants, I chop them up and soak them in some salt water, and that also helps remove a lot of that bitterness. The first garden bed we were harvesting at is right there. In between both of the beds, I had like this little empty space that the grass was just growing there. And I was like, man, how can I really utilize that little nook and cranny to grow food? Well, this year I've been sticking in a lot of grow bags, like in awkward corners, spaces like this that's kind of too small to fit a full, garden bed or something like that. Or like edges along my property line. I've just been popping in lots of grow bags. And I have maximized my growing space tremendously by just squeezing in grow bags into weird little awkward unused areas. So there's actually about 4 grow bags right there. I've got tomatoes in them, herbs, flowers, peppers. Now this bed kind of might look a little crazy, but let me just explain what I'm doing here, because this is a good example of how to maximize a very small growing space. This bed is 3 foot wide by 8 foot long. It's not very big. In the back, I have a trellis. I'm growing loofah on that trellis right there. And in the front here, again, I have onions growing on the edges of the bed. And then I have 2 T-posts here with some wire going across the top so that I can trellis up my tomatoes again with the hook and spool system, which I'm absolutely in love with that system. It's my favorite way of trellising tomatoes going on out from now. But anyways, the idea behind this is the tomatoes are here in the front. When you're using a tomato hook and trellis system like this, you prune off a lot of the lower leaves. As these grow and get taller, the leaf mass is going to be more concentrated up here. So that means sunlight can still go through these plants through the bottom and hit the plants and crops and things that are growing in the middle of this bed. So that way everything is getting enough light. These are really bushy. I need to remove some of these extra leaves, but they are getting taller and taller. And by the time they get up here, everything behind it is going to get tons and tons of sunlight. I only recommend that you do this if you're using this tomato hook system. If you're just going to plant regular, tomatoes with tomato cages, it's definitely going to block out the sunlight from anything that's growing behind it. So that's the only way that I recommend you do this. I have lots of different peppers growing in the middle. When I look at a garden bed or a space, I always think of 3 things. What can I plant vertically in the back so it doesn't block out sunlight from everything else growing in the bed? Then you're gonna choose middle plants. I always look for like medium-sized plants like peppers, eggplants, flowers, herbs, that kind of thing. And I mix them all in there. Then I think about what can I plant on the edges of the bed that can spill out and not grow inside of that bed, but on the outer edges, on the outside area surrounding the beds, or vertically, you know, up in some way. One of my favorite things to do is plant any kind of vining plant like squashes, melons, that kind of thing on the edges of my beds and grow bags so that they will set root into the ground, but their biomass, all the leaves, vines, all of that will spill out and grow along around the bed, right? So that helps me maximize a lot of space because I can grow things in the middle and then grow things all surrounding. So there's a lot of production going on in this bed. We have several different varieties of tomatoes. We have onions. I have chamomile in there. Tons of different kinds of peppers, loofah, eggplants. There's a lot going on here, and that's how I maximize my production in a small garden. All right, so now we've moved behind the garden bed that I was just showing you because I have tons of Rosa Bianca eggplants that I also need to harvest. And let me just say one thing. When you grow eggplants, dude, like 1 or 2 of these feeds an entire family, okay? They produce so much like volume of food. And if you want to learn how to grow eggplants from seed all the way to harvest, I do have a full YouTube video tutorial, so go check that out. A lot of these are ready for harvest. This is Rosa Bianca. It's an old Italian heirloom, and I love making eggplant parmesan with this. Another thing I would say about growing eggplants is be prepared for spider mites. All of my eggplants have spider mites. It always happens. They really love attacking eggplants for some reason. So just be prepared. You can use BT or spinosad spray or even some organic insecticidal soap. A lot of people also like to make homemade sprays with soap. The only thing that I caution is please don't use Dawn or any kind of dish soap because it's a detergent. It's not a soap. So you're spraying detergent on your plants. Use an all-natural soap like Dr. Bonner's or something like that if you're going to make some kind of home remedy with soap. This is so pretty. And by the way, I probably have seeds for just about everything that I'm showing you guys in this video on my website. So if you want to grow the same ones, go check out my website. And there's quite a few more on here, but they're still kind of too hard to the touch and a little too small. So I'm just going to leave them for a few more days. All right, so I'm done harvesting all of the eggplants. Now I'm going to harvest some greens. This one is called Vibrant Ultraviolet. It's a mustard green. It's holding up pretty well to the heat because yes, here in Florida, it's already way too hot. Like starting in March and up, you really have to switch to heat tolerant greens because all your spring greens, lettuces, stuff like that are not going to tolerate this kind of heat. We're already getting days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah, but this has been doing pretty well and I really love the color of these leaves. This is growing in a whiskey barrel, by the way, and it's doing very well. The leaves have a very beautiful like purple coloration to them in their veins and it's a nice glossy green. You could harvest them when they're tender baby greens like this one right here and add it to your salads. It has a wonderful flavor. The more mature, bigger leaves, I like to add into soups or stir fries. Not only do I enjoy eating these mustard greens, but so do my chickens. Remember when I was saying I've been popping in grow bags into every nook and cranny that I can find in my garden? Well, here's a prime example. This is the side of my property here. There was just grass, nothing growing here. But I decided to pop in a line of grow bags. These are 15-gallon and 30-gallon grow bags. I planted 2 different kinds of potatoes. This is the Red Norland, which is a great variety, especially if you're in the South, because it's an early maturing variety and potatoes kind of struggle in the warmer climates. They don't like the heat at all. So try to get the varieties that mature early. That way you can grow them, harvest them out real quick before it gets too hot. I have a grow bag with some ginger because ginger spreads through rhizomes and here in Florida they go crazy. They really love our tropical heat and weather and everything. So to kind of control it a little bit, I grow them in containers or grow bags. And that way too, when it's time to harvest, I just kick the bag over and I harvest everything out. These bags here have some peppers, some eggplants, and tons of different herbs. I also am trying to grow some artichoke. There's not a lot of information available about growing artichoke in Florida. So if you have been successful growing artichoke in zones 9, 10, 11, and up, please let me know in the comments below and let me know what variety is doing good for you as well. Here's a patch of a variety of different kales. If you're in a warmer climate like zones 8 and up, very hot summers, I always recommend that you plant kale in a spot that gets a lot of bright morning sun, but then like complete afternoon shade. That will greatly extend the life of your kale plants. Once temperatures get above around 85 degrees, they're wilting a little bit, not because they don't have enough water, but because it's just so hot. So this just happens, you know, every day in the middle of the day. This variety right here is called scarlet kale. I really love the pretty ruffled leaves, and then the veins have a purple color to them. I also have some rosemary growing here, milkweed for the butterflies, and some more of that ultraviolet mustard green all around here. It's all growing underneath this nectarine tree. So I have a lot of fruit trees in a line here towards the back of my property. I take advantage of the shade that these fruit trees offer and plant, you know, the tender greens and stuff like that that do not like heat underneath all my fruit trees. Now we're like in the middle of my garden. These are 2 raised garden beds that I built out of pressure treated wood. At the back, I have some T-posts with a wire on top to grow some tomatoes on the hook and spool type of system set up. So there's quite a few tomatoes back there. In the middle, I'm growing shorter plants like herbs, flowers. I've got calendula, oregano, these beautiful nasturtiums. I have a couple patches of different kinds of carrots that I've been growing. I'm actually going to let these ones go to seed so I can add some more seeds to my shop. You'll notice that I grow a lot of nasturtiums in my garden because they are a trap crop for aphids. Plus, these flowers are edible. They have a very nice peppery flavor. Here's the second raised garden bed, and I just wanted to show you again, I'm always planting like squashes or melons on the sides of my beds so that they spill on over and overtake this space. This is some Tahitian squash. It's kind of like a butternut squash. I love this variety for the warm climates. It's actually native to like the Caribbean, so if you're in the South, this is going to grow really well for you. So moving right along, this is the back of my property, and again, I have a bunch of different fruit trees in here. This spot gets a lot of afternoon shade, so one of the crops that you can grow as an edible fruit or berry is actually ground cherries. This is actually perennial in the mild zones like mine. I'm zone 9. They're ready to harvest when the outer husk is completely dried out. A lot of times they'll drop to the floor, and that's how you know that they're ready to harvest, hence the name ground cherries. But it's a little golden berry like this. It kind of looks like a little cherry tomato. They're delicious. They're very sweet. They have like a pineapple, strawberry, banana type of flavor to them. And it's a perennial edible. You can harvest a whole bunch of these and make jams or pies with them. But I like to eat them fresh. I also have a couple plants of Seminole pumpkin growing again along the edges of this bed so that the vines can spill out and overtake the surrounding area. This is a Meyer lemon tree. And I also have some firebush here. That's to attract the hummingbird. Right here, I have one Everglades tomato plant. I have quite a few of them because they kind of just pop up and seed on their own. They are native to Florida. They take on our weather, the pests, the diseases pretty well. This one's not looking too good, actually. It's pretty covered in spider mites, so I have to treat for it. But it just, every day, I'm harvesting loads and loads of these little currant-sized tomatoes. They have a very nice savory flavor to them. I don't prune this, I don't fertilize it, I barely even treat it, not like, you know, the other tomatoes that I grow, and it just thrives and produces for me almost year-round. I definitely have seeds for Everglades tomatoes on my website if you want to try growing it. Just know that for whatever reason, these seeds take a little longer to germinate than your standard regular tomato varieties. I don't know why. It is normal for these to take around 21 days to germinate. I always recommend that you use a heat pad to help speed things up. Now we're moving towards the last side of my garden here. This is probably the most productive side that I have. I used to have raised beds in here, but I actually pulled them all out because over the years, I've been adding wood chips, more and more wood chips, and they've composted down, and I have really rich soil over here, at least 12 to 15 inches deep of just dark, rich, composted soil. So at this point, I'm able to just pop things in wherever I want. I am using a weed blocking material. This is the DeWitt brand, and I do have a link to Amazon below if you want to get the same one. I have used lots of different brands of weed blocking material, and this one is by far the best one. I am one person and I manage 2 huge gardens. I can't keep up with the weeding on my own. Here in Florida, the weeds get out of control so quickly, especially during the summer, and it's just impossible. So I've now implemented this weed blocking material. I use a blowtorch to burn holes into it so I could just pop in my transplants, and it's been working great. I don't have to weed this area at all. Now, at the end of the season, when it's time to clean out all the crops, I can easily just lift the weed blocking material up and I can throw on fresh compost, you know, any soil amendments, whatever I have to do. All right, I'm gonna caution you guys because this is like a jungle, okay? But it's a jungle of food. I have a very small garden, so I maximize my space. I grow a lot of things closer than what the seed packets normally say, and that is actually fine for the home backyard gardener. The directions on seed packets are more geared towards commercial farms that have a lot of space and that usually don't have very good soil. But as a backyard gardener, you're probably amending your soil and composting, so there's a lot of nutrients available. My plants aren't competing with each other. In general, I kind of planned this out to be just a bunch of rows, but everything is mixed up. I have veggie crops followed by flowers, herbs, just everything's in there. Let me show you what I have growing here. In the front here, I have some cocoa zel squash. It's actually one of my favorite zucchini varieties to grow. If you've ever grown squash before, you'll notice that they kind of grow along a spinal cord. I call it a spinal cord because it looks like a spinal cord in my opinion. So it's constantly putting on new growth and growing from the tip of that spinal cord, and it ends up being like just a really long vine at the end of my season. So as these plants grow, I will be taking those spinal cords and vines and kind of pushing them out this way so that they can overtake this empty space up here and not block out light and things for the crops growing around it. In the middle here, I have some chrysanthemum flowers, the same kind that you use for chrysanthemum tea. I have some red garnet amaranth. I love growing amaranth, and that red color is going to look so pretty in between all of these greens. In the back, I have a trellis. This is my favorite trellis system. I use 2 T-posts. I have 1 electrical conduit pipe going over the top, and I kind of hang this vinyl mesh trellis, weave it through kind of like a curtain. This thing is 10 foot long. It supports even heavy crops like loofah or tromboncino rapicante. On half of it, I have some pole beans, and on the other half, I have cucumbers. If you want to find the supplies to build this, I do have a link to Amazon below. On this side here, I have a couple rows of sweet corn. I grow sweet corn almost year round here in Florida. I start growing it in January. Yes, in January. And the last time I'll sow some seeds is around August, just to make sure I harvest everything before it starts getting a little too cold. This is a big fennel plant. I have fennel all over my garden. I mostly grow it for the butterflies because it's a host plant for the black swallowtail butterfly, but it's also really tasty. I like to harvest the bulbs, slice them up, mix them with some olive oil, salt, and pepper, and then put them in the air fryer until they get crispy. It's really good. On this side, I have another trellis system where again, I have some more pole beans and cucumbers growing on there. This is some pure acicaba. It's a Brazilian sprouting broccoli. It's my favorite. It's super heat tolerant. This one I let go to seed because I sell the seeds on my website, so I plan on collecting all of these seeds. But the bees also love these little yellow flowers. I do have one pure acicaba that I have not allowed to go to flower because, well, I'm eating from it, so I don't want it to flower. This one right here just sprouted some flowers, so I just pull them off. And this plant, this is one plant. Look at it. Since when have you ever grown a broccoli that has got this big? Now, pure acicaba is not a heading type of broccoli. You're not going to harvest like one big head. Instead, it produces a lot of side shoots. The whole plant is edible, and in my opinion, this tastes like broccoli and asparagus had a baby. I cook with these just like I would broccoli rabe or rapini. Every couple days, I'm in here harvesting more and more of these side shoots. By far, pure acicaba is the longest lasting brassicas in my garden. It is now April. This thing is still going strong. I will still be harvesting this up into May, which says a lot because all the rest of my, traditional standard broccolis and cauliflowers have long died and withered away back in February. All right, now we move to the other side of this garden space, but here is some hollyhock. And I didn't think hollyhock would grow in Florida because it doesn't look like a tropical plant. It looks like a cottage garden or something that would grow up north much better than here in Florida. I started seeds for this in September and it has been blooming for a couple months now. It's as tall as my house. It's crazy, but it's gorgeous. It makes me so happy to look at these. And this variety is called Summer Carnival. This is also where my favorite kale grows. This kale has been growing here for over a year and a half. I'm in shock because Usually I start seeds for kale in around September. I grow them all fall, winter, and spring, and by the time summer comes, they just wither away and they die. They really don't stand the heat that much. But this spot actually gets a lot of afternoon shade, and this has survived here through the summer, through a couple hurricanes. There was a big branch up here, but something bored its way into that, so I need to cut that piece off. But I still have 2 or 3 other branches here producing loads and loads of leaves. This variety is called Lacinato, Black Tuscan, or Dinosaur Kale. It's all the same thing. But this is by far the #1 kale variety I recommend for anyone in zones 8 and up. This is the end of my garden, and it's my favorite part. This is where I grow all of my heirloom tomatoes. If you've been following me for some time, you probably noticed I'm pretty crazy about tomatoes. They're my favorite thing to grow. I have 4 rows here using the hook and spool system so I could really maximize how many different varieties of tomatoes I can grow. Underneath these tomatoes, I have planted marigolds, nasturtiums, flowers like zinnias, bachelor's buttons, and even borage, which I have some right here. This is because all of these plants deter pests and they attract a lot of beneficial insects. But anyways, let's see what's available for harvesting. So it's really crammed in here, but I'm trying my best. This is one of the more popular tomatoes that I sell seeds on my website for. This is called black strawberry. And it definitely is one of my favorites, but I would have to say if you're growing this, you have to wait until these are completely ripe in order to enjoy the best flavor. If you harvest them too early, they kind of have a weird acidity to them that I personally don't like. But if you allow them to fully ripen up, the flavor is just so much more developed, it's sweeter, it really tastes awesome. You'll know they're ready to harvest when they start blushing like pink like this all over. If it has any green on it, do not harvest them. Let them mature a little bit more. Now we're more towards the back of one of these rows. This one is called Owen's Purple, and I can't tell you how many of these giant tomatoes I have harvested from just one plant. If you struggle with like birds pecking at your tomatoes, or sometimes the worms will bore into them, it's okay to harvest them a little bit early. As soon as you start seeing blushing on the bottom, you can harvest them at this stage and they will continue ripening up on your kitchen counter. So I'm going to harvest these 2 right here. I feel like I have to play Where's Waldo with you guys because I'm covered by these tomato plants. This is the Pomodoro Core Antico di Acquiterme tomato, which is in my top 3. And seeds for this sell out like almost instantly. It's still loaded, so I'll have some more seeds soon. This is my favorite when it comes to an old Italian heirloom that is great for making sauces, but it's a dual purpose tomato because it also tastes great if you eat it fresh. And they get really big. They don't have a lot of seeds, hence why I don't get a lot of seeds from my shop. But that's great when you're looking for a tomato that's good for sauces because, well, you don't want a lot of seeds in your sauce. If you want to make sure that you grab some seeds next time, sign up for my email newsletter because I email everyone alerting them when these are back in stock. And this row just keeps going back there. It's full of different tomatoes. Honestly, this is my happy place. I love sitting in between tomato plants. I love the way they smell. Some people absolutely hate it, but you know, those of you that love it understand. And we're almost to the end here. This is the last bit of my garden left to show you guys. This is cucamelon. The reason why I'm growing these little cucamelons is because they're perennial in my zone. So if you live in the warmer climates, I would say zones 9 and up, where it doesn't snow, these will most likely survive your winter. These survived my winter without being covered at all. I refuse to cover my plants. So these survived. They got a little sad looking, but they are perking back up now and putting on a lot of new growth. Again, this is perennial and this is gonna get huge. It's gonna go over my 6-foot privacy fence here. It produces loads of these little watermelon looking cucumbers. It's not really a cucumber though. It's not even part of the cucumber family, but it has a flavor very similar to cucumber and I use them just like you would a cucumber. My favorite way is to actually just quick pickle them, but you can also throw them on top of salads. And you only need 1 cucamelon plant, okay? These things are crazy. They grow out of control. It starts dropping little cucamelons all over the floor, so it will very easily spread around your garden. But look at them, aren't they adorable? Well, I hope you enjoyed having a tour of my garden and coming along while I harvest. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, make sure you subscribe to my channel because I post new videos on a daily basis. If you have any questions for me, please comment below. I'd also like to know what you're most excited about growing this spring and summer season. Thank you for watching and happy gardening.